Hey everybody, today we're tackling some of the more common questions that are coming up in reference to the FedWire ISO migration. I've already answered some of the questions, but there's actually some more that I want to go ahead and address. First question, what is the difference between the ISO 20022 implementation for FedWire Fund Services and the ISO 20022 for the FedNow service? Whew, that's a good one. See, both FedWire and FedNow services are moving to ISO 20022, but there are some key distinctions you need to know about. Here you go. First of all, let's start with the basics. While both FedWire Fund Services and FedNow services FedNow's already, use ISO 20022 formatting, these are separate payment channels. Totally separate payment channels, totally separate initiatives, different teams even working on this. It's like renovating an old house, FedWire Funds, versus building a new one, FedNow. The FedNow service, it is a brand new payment system, and it does use the ISO 20022 messaging system, has from day one. And ISO 20022 is the global standard for instant payments, and the Fed is keeping in line with that standard that we see around the globe. In contrast, the FedWire Fund Service, it's replacing its current proprietary message format with the more globally used and accepted ISO 20022 messaging. For FedWire Funds, it's a bit like swapping out an old engine for a new one while keeping the rest of the car intact, okay? The Federal Reserve Banks, they actually aim to align implementation of the ISO 20022 message format for both services as closely as possible. However, again, they're different payment channels, so there's going to be some differences. For example, the FedWire Fund Service will not adopt the request for information feature that is part of the FedNow service. It just won't work that way. Now, this decision is made to ensure that the FedWire Fund Service customers don't receive or have to deal with new types of messages. But it's available in FedNow, don't get me wrong, and it's a great adage to the FedNow service, but it's not necessarily needed in FedWire Funds. I do want to note that these two systems, they're not going to talk to each other, even though they're going to have similar formatting, okay? Even though they're both on ISO 20022, they are totally different. So they're not going to communicate to each other, even though they're using a similar language, let's say. Now, if you do need more help to navigate through these differences, the Federal Reserve Banks have published the ISO 20022 message specifications for both the FedNow service and the FedWire service on the My Standards website. You do have to have access to that website to be able to get that document. The comparison, though, what it does is that feature allows users to identify the differences between the ISO 20022 messages for the two services. It is really, it's like having a side-by-side comparison of your favorite guitars and which one am I going to buy? I just want both. Oh, next, sorry, keep going. Now, common question, another common question that comes up is, will there be an opportunity to send ISO 20022 messages before the migration on March 10th, 2025? For FedWire Fund Services, the actual answer is no. See, the ISO 22 messages won't be supported, at least not on a live system, until the funds transfer business day on March 10th, 2025 starts at 9 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, March 9th, 2025. So mark your calendars for that, but there's other ways you can test, and you want to be testing before then, but you can't send one live. You can just do testing until then. Another important question. Does ISO 20022 migration apply only to the FedWire Fund Service? This migration does not apply to FedWire security services. It does not apply to Fed ACH services. So if you're dealing with those, rest easy, there's no change. They have their own format, especially ACH. The migration only applies to FedWire funds, not securities. Well, there you have it. Well, both the FedWire Fund Service and the FedNow service are using ISO 20022. They're a little different. And again, they're not communicating with each other. The FedNow service started off using ISO 20022, whereas the FedWire Fund Service is transitioning from an older existing format to the newer ISO 20022 format. Make sure you're prepared for these changes and take advantages of the resources that are available on My Standards website. Now, again, you do have to register for that website. And I gotta say, stay tuned because I'm gonna be releasing more updates and insights as they develop. But in the meantime, you can always go to the paymentsprofessor.com website for classes, even books, and information on the world of electronic payments. For now, keep innovating, keep learning, and hit that subscribe button. Class dismissed.